Hello, everyone. It is Irene here. Welcome to this live stream and this special topic lecture that I am titling The Two Eyes. And one of those eyes is not my name. It is Interoception and Integration. I'll say that one more time. I'm going to be talking about the two eyes, interoception and integration. Now I'm going to define these and give examples as we go on, but since this is a live chat, I'm going to wait to ensure we've got some folks here live before I start talking and lecturing. If you are watching the recording, thank you for click and play and watching this after fact. I'll just give a little shout out to where we are currently. So this is a timely note. Right now, it is September 4th. We are in registration for my 12-week curriculum that is called SmartBody, SmartMind. So if you are here and interested in learning about SmartBody, SmartMind, you have a question about SmartBody, SmartMind, we also call it SBSM for short, please put that in the chat and I will be sure to do my best to answer your question around this powerful program. If it is a question that's a logistical question, my team is in here watching the chat and they will answer to you also if it's a quick link or a quick, one word or one sentence answer. I will be doing Q&A after I get through some of the theory. I have notes, I have all sorts of things. So that's what we're going to be talking about, is not only integration and interoception, what that means, but how that connects to this online program that has been designed to heal trauma at the nervous system level, to restore regulation of our nervous system when we didn't get it in the first place. So I'm going to be talking a lot about babies and infancy and how we need certain conditions to be right to build a strong, healthy, robust immune system, GI tract, endocrine system, cardiac system, all these systems, but that connects to how we were regulated when we were young. So before I get into more, I want to just check out the chat and see where everybody is from. So if you are, wherever you are in the world, let me know where you are, just so I can make a connection to that part of those land masses here on planet Earth. And I'll get into the lecture really soon. The lecture will be shorter than normal. I can often go on and on and on for hours and hours. I won't do that today. I will get into some basics and then we'll get into questions. So again, if you have questions about SmartBody, SmartMind, please let me know what they are. And then also I'll be doing other talks this week, one tomorrow on chronic illness and the connection with chronic illness, trauma, the nervous system, and how SmartBody, SmartMind works with that at a very, very deep level. And for many of our alumni, successful levels. On, what day is it today? Wednesday, that's Thursday. On Friday, I'll be doing a special talk on mental illness and addiction. And I will touch into that a little bit today because I'm going to read out some results from a study we did with an academic unit about 4 years ago now, and really positive results around working with our bodies, our minds, this interoception through SmartBody, SmartMind, and healing our entire system. And then on Saturday, we have a really special one. I'm going to be joined with my husband. His name is Seth. He's also a colleague of mine. He teaches within the hallways of SBSM online. And we will be doing a special lecture on Zoom. So if you want to join that, you have to sign up so we can get you the Zoom link and the replay. That talk will be all for parents and practitioners. However, a little hint, if you're not a parent and you're not a practitioner, or you don't plan to ever be a parent or a practitioner, you can still attend. We'll be talking about the importance of healthy aggression and working with that for our healing. And the focus will be for parents and why it is essential for them to build up their healthy aggression and their capacity so they can parent and foster that in their children. And then, of course, practitioners, if you work with someone and you're trying to help someone work through their own stored rage and terror and trauma and get their healthy aggression on board, you must be solid in your own healthy aggression. This ties in very closely with boundaries, standing up for ourselves, being able to express and speak. So that is what's in store for the rest of the week. Let's get going here. I'll just read out some things here. Ireland, Cambridge, Sweden, Washington State, Denmark, Copenhagen, Louisiana, Wisconsin, Edmonton, South Africa, Hamburg, Germany. Hello, hello. All right, Long Island, another person in Germany, San Francisco, Pacific Northwest, the USA, the Netherlands, Victoria, Pennsylvania, Santa Rosa, California. Yes, I know Santa Rosa very well. London, Paris, Germany, Florida. Beautiful. South Africa, Lancashire, another South African. Okay, beautiful. Oh, Gabriola, that must be the island. Okie dokie. So let's get going here. And what you will see, just for the sake of where I'm looking, I've got a screen here with questions that will pop up. So if you type a question into this chat, I will get it on another screen, so I'm not having to manage the chat so much. So thanks to my team, Ari and Crystal, who are there. Yes, and just a clarification, these mini lectures and all of this information is on my site under live events. These little guys that I'm doing solo will be here on YouTube today, Thursday, and Friday. And then Saturday's call is on Zoom, and that is a more formal call. So that one you do need to register for. And they're all free of charge. So you can just register and hang out with us on Saturday. Okay, so the topic of the day, interoception and integration. So interoception, it sounds like a fancy word, but it's quite simple. It means the capacity to tune into our internal sensations, but not just our sensations, our guts, our viscera, our heart, our muscles, tension in the body, our fascia. Have you ever felt like your bones are aching because you're about to get a flu or you've got food poisoning? This is interoception. And typically, we tend to only, and I'm going to be very general here, as Westerners, again, I'm generalizing, we tend to have a skewed and not so accurate view of our inside perception, this interoception. And there's lots of reasons for that, and I'll get into those in a moment. But typically, has anybody here felt they're about to get like a sniffle or a cold? You know, your throat is scratchy, or you know, oh man, I think I just ate something off, and you start to feel the grumbles in your belly, right? Something's not happy. That might produce gas. There might be vomiting. I'm being a little descriptive, but we deal with these things, as do our children, of course. Those internal sensations, that is us having interoception. As a rule, not always, but typically, we listen to our bodies when things have gotten really bad. And what we want to do when we have a healthy nervous system, when we have good attunement to ourself, that's a key word, attunement, we can actually tell when something is off way before it gets really, really bad, right? You might feel extra tired. You might feel extra sluggish. For the ladies here who are in their reproductive menstrual years, most of us, I think, and sometimes it can be extreme, we can tell where we are in our cycle based on what's going on in our uterus, what's going on in our breast tissue, our hunger changes because our caloric needs shift. When we're in tune with ourselves, we feel these changes in our monthly cycle. And that is interoception. Other parts about interoception is that it develops based on how we were attuned to when we were young. So I'm going to do a little story about infancy because it's important here. So again, in the chat, let me know if you're here because you know you have dysregulation. So I'd like to see, where are people? Are you new here? Are you like, yep, I know I have dysregulation. Yep, I don't have a good accurate sense of my internal sensations. This also comes down to hunger, our ability to know I'm hungry, I'm not hungry. I'm thirsty, I'm not thirsty. I'm tired, I'm not tired. I sense something isn't right. So this is our interoception. Thank you. And people are saying, I don't think I've ever felt regulated. New here, lots of dysregulation. Definitely have dysregulation, been fight and flight mode. Thank you. So my sense is a lot of you are here because you want to heal this dysregulation. But we have to go back in time to when we were born. When we were born, not everything is online, but we do have our ability to rest, to digest our food. We also have the ability to sense fear. Something isn't right. So I'm really shortening this talk. When we come out, we have this ability to sense hunger, temperature, fear, something's not right, loud noises. We can tell by the touch of our caregivers if they're being kind or not, all these things. So as a baby, when we were all babies, we would cry. We would be in distress. We aren't emotional. So as infants, we cry because we feel physiological distress. I'm going to say that one more time because it's really important. When we're babies, we cry because we have physiological distress. Because we are so dependent on our caregiver, usually it's our mother, could be a father, nanny, grandma, auntie. It is their job as the older person to co-regulate with us when we are in distress and attune to us. So those are two key words, co-regulate, attune, to meet our physiological distress needs. Oh, little baby Irene is hungry. That's the cry of hunger. Let me pick her up and feed her. Whether it's bottle or breast, it does matter, but for the sake of it, we'll just say baby needs food. That's the cry of hunger. As soon as baby gets that food, they start suckling, they get nourishment into their belly. So here's where this is going. They knew they were hungry because something's not right in their belly. They are feeling their interoception, sensation of internal environment. They get the food, they're with a warm, caring, co-regulating person. Usually there's eye contact when feeding occurs. The baby goes, oh, yay. Everything comes down. That is a little drop of co-regulation between the infant and the caregiver. That then creates a little drop of regulation, and they are no longer in distress, and they have a good positive experience of their internal environment. It's allowed to be felt quickly, this soothing. So this is teaching soothing. The other one might be baby is too hot or too cold. Parent says, oh, little baby looks like they're shivering and their lips are blue, or they're beating up red. We need to cool them down. They're in distress. They might make a whimper, a cry. They connect. They're feeling their insides. They're feeling their interoception, but they need the caregiver to give them what they need to come out of that distress. And again, that co-regulation creates self-regulation, temperature regulates, and they feel good again inside. So these are just some little examples of how we as infants build up positive self-regulation through co-regulation, attunement, secure attachment, and then we get a good experience of our insides. Now, of course, there is the flip side to this, which I think you might all understand, but I'll go over it. Let's say baby is crying, hungry, I need food. Nobody comes because maybe they're being sleep trained, which happens. They are using methods to make sure that baby only gets hungry at certain times. This is very Pavlovian, very conditioning, and it works because we can be conditioned like other mammals, like dogs in the classic experiments of Ivan Pavlov. And so we're hungry, we're in distress. We feel the pains in our stomach. It hurts, it's cramping, we're crying, nobody's there. And then we just get so distressed, nobody shows up. that we go into what we would call maybe a freeze response. And then if really there's nobody there, we go into a shutdown and collapse response. So what's occurring there is that little one is not getting good co-regulation. They're not getting those little nice drops of self-regulation. Their distress is not being soothed, and that so they essentially pass out, because that's what occurs. People think, oh, baby's self-soothing because they're going to sleep. No, they are not. They are literally going into a state of shutdown and collapse. So they go under into sleep with intense distress and a very poor negative experience of their insides. I'll give another example. A little older, let's say toddler for the first time ever falls and breaks skin, right? They scrape their knee, they bonk their head on something, they feel an immense amount of pain. We know what it's like. I just cut myself last night on a blender blade. It hurts, it stings, you have to take care of it, you need to bandage it, all these things. So of course I know how to do that as an adult, but a little one doesn't know what to do. So the positive is parent sees that, doesn't freak out, doesn't cause more distress, goes, oh dear, we need to help you. Let's get you cleaned up and it's all happy and let's hold you and kiss the boo-boo and all these things that we know we want to do with infants, toddlers, I should say, when they trip and fall and hurt themselves. There's a process of engagement. There's a process of connection. There's a process of co-regulation. It lets the little one know, I'm not going to die because of this scraped knee. I'm being taken care of. I'm being taught how to come out of my activated stress response. Soothes it, everything's okay, big hug, and then positive distraction. Let's go read a book. Let's find a positive resource. So that would be scenario one. That's good scenario. Of course, many of us didn't get that. So this is how this ties into interoception. Let's say we scrape our elbow, knee, and we're told as we are crying and wailing and feeling this internal pain, because the body is going into a stress response. And this is true. You break skin, the immune system, it pops in, redness occurs, all these things. If our parent or caregiver says, you're not that bad, it's not that bad, stop crying, which I have no doubt many of us have heard, the infant, the toddler, this would be a toddler age, there's a moment of confusion because they're feeling internally something is really off, but this big person is saying, you're fine, don't worry about it. They might still clean it up, but they do it kind of in haste. It's like this, oh, come on, let's get you cleaned up. You know, they grab you under and they bring you to the bathroom, they stick you in the tub, and there's roughness. There isn't this gentleness. So this is another way that our interoception for pain can be thrown off. Compound that over a lifetime with that kind of parental structure. And it's not, I'll say this right now, it's not the parent's fault right now. I often say it's nobody's fault and it's everyone's fault. And what that means is that we don't realize that that is not conducive to good health in a toddler or in the sake of a crying baby, an infant. And the reason why, so I'm going to bridge this. I like to bridge lots of topics, guys, so bear with me here. This goes into the transgenerational traumas that we talk about, intergenerational traumas. If a parent didn't get this good co-regulating juiciness from their parents, and their parents didn't get it from their parents, no one is going to know what to do. And the odd thing is humans, we have kind of been thrown off the track of organic, healthy child rearing because of domestication of plants and animals, because of industry, because of medicalization of births, because of this beautiful technology that allows us to connect. We have been really, dare I say, conditioned, programmed to not know how to listen to our insides. And these are true stories. I've worked with many, many parents in many, many countries throughout my private practice and online programs. A mother might be told by their pediatrician, you've got to let your baby cry so they self-soothe. I don't think this happens very much anymore, but this is what used to be told. You got to let them cry, all these things. I will talk to mothers who will say, I tried, Irene, I tried and I couldn't bear. And I say, awesome, because that mother is hearing and feeling her own interoception, and she can't bear to let that little one wail and wail in a room with a closed door in their crib. It's the same with tummy time, which is a common thing taught. Parents will say, I put my infant on the floor and they were in distress. They were red in the face. They were crying and crying and crying. Some parents will override their instinct, their maternal and paternal instinct, and let it happen. And I don't shame those people. It just shows how deeply conditioned they are to not trust their gut. So back to interoception. Stephen Porges, who sort of coined what's called the polyvagal theory, I'm sure some of you have heard of this. He really put on the block the nuance and the complexity of our autonomic nervous system as human mammals. And he calls interoception our sixth sense. And babies, their first brain is their gut. That is their sixth sense. And to develop a really healthy human, we want to work with that gut visceral sixth sense. As adults, which all of you are, you're here because you want to learn, I hope, how to heal your nervous system, how to heal all the things that happen when we have a dysregulated nervous system. And I will get into those on my talks tomorrow and Friday on chronic illness and mental health and addiction, respectively. I'm not going to go into details, but I will get into polyvagal theory tomorrow and the next day. Where was I going with that? So we need to work as adults who are dysregulated, not just with our mind and what might be called top-down approach. This is common with cognitive behavioral therapy, also known as CBT therapy. This is common with journaling, coaching, behavior modification. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with having these in our toolbox of complementary practices and technologies to work with. But we know that if we're not working from the bottom up, as well as maybe top down, we're not getting to the core or root of why we have dysregulation and why we can't feel ourselves. And I will add, feel ourselves accurately. So I want to read something. So we haven't released this, my team and I, but about 4 years ago, we did a research study with a neuroscience university lab at the University of British Columbia. Ironically, the lab was called the Smart Lab, and our program, my program that I've created, is called SmartBody, SmartMind. No connection. It was just pure coincidence. Maybe, maybe not. But they offered us a write-up to the results. And in the end, we started with 86 participants who went through our SmartBody, SmartMind 12-week program. And in the end, because of attrition, this happens in human studies, 41 was our final number. For those of you that know science, the power was 41. So we had 41 subjects in the end. And what this researcher was researching is interoception. And so she's talking about the need to have bottom-up approaches. And so here's what she writes directly. So I'm going to read a little bit. She writes, research demonstrates that we must have bottom-up approaches using interoceptive awareness, and they are underutilized in many mainstream mental health approaches. This is particularly relevant for people who may have been exposed to different types of trauma, including childhood adversity. And trauma can negatively impact one's ability to connect with and feel safe in one's own body. Here's what the study revealed. So this is a real study using SmartBody, SmartMind. The study revealed several significant findings. First, it was found that, as anticipated, the program did result in several increases in participants' somatic and interoceptive awareness relative to baseline. So we tested people at the beginning and we tested them at the end, and we saw this increase in interoception, awareness of insides. Specifically, they reported, this is super cool, greater trust and safety in their body as well as less worrying about bodily experiences. Does anybody get that? You feel something and you instantly are afraid that you have cancer or a blood clot or an ulcer or something is wrong. Tie that into the baby that feels distress and nobody comes to soothe that. You see that connection? If we're never taught, this is okay, this is just hunger, or this is okay, this is just the heat of your immune system because you just opened up your skin due to a fall, or this is okay, this is just a little mild fever because your body is fighting an infection. If you don't have that feedback from the outside world, from another human being with calmness and regulation, we will fear what we sense inside. And this is the crux of getting through really tough symptoms, is being able to sense discomfort and not go into more fear because of the discomfort. I hope that makes sense. So I'll keep reading here. Compared to baseline, participants also showed greater self-compassion, as well as a trend towards improvements in relationship functioning. So isn't that interesting that this happened just by focusing on interoception, just by working with the body and the viscera, as is taught in SmartBody, SmartMind? We're not doing therapy with the mind. We're not working with emotions directly, but these relational and senses of just better self-worth and self-compassion were coming up. As well as participants also self-reported specific improvements in cognitive function, including their ability to focus and regulate their attention, avoid distraction, and be better organized. Although these findings were based on self-report, most participants performed well on the cognitive testing at baseline. So people were mentally pretty sharp, but it continued to hold and got better towards the end. That's what that means. People who had mental health challenges reported doing slightly better in terms of being less distractible and less over-identified with their problems. Again, key piece there. When we have stuff going in our body that we can't understand and we aren't able to focus strategically on our internal environment, we feel like we're living in chaos. Does anybody know a little bit about that? And we don't know what to do with all these things zooming through. So again, we can learn this through neuroplasticity. We can learn how to find this ability to have better focus and be less identified with these symptoms. Final couple sentences here. Those with high ACEs, so Adverse Childhood Experiences score, this is a study that connected early adversity with illness later in life. So those with higher ACEs seem to benefit more from the program than those without, including a greater reduction in perceived stress, overall physical symptom severity, and reduction in trauma-related functional impairments, as well as a trend towards higher resiliency. So we haven't published this. They're still trying to find a journal to publish this in. It takes time to do these things. But I really wanted to share that because often people ask, Irene, do you have any data, evidence-based research data to back up your programs and all that? And here we are. We have our first study. And of course, we've got thousands of people who have gone through the programs with positive results. So interoception, I'm not going to go any more deeper into it. I want to get to questions in a second, but I want to finish this little mini lecture with integration. So I'm going to use an analogy to prove the point of why we need to integrate when we are healing our nervous system, working with our trauma, and working with our viscera. So for example, if you've ever learned a language as an adult, I'm sure someone here has learned a second language as an adult, so let me know if you have. It's not enough to just learn words and pronunciation and accuracy of how we articulate. So someone could give me Italian. I speak French, so it's easy for me to do Italian. I could read it and make it sound like I know what I'm saying. I could even memorize a few sentences, and I've heard this with actors. Well, they'll memorize whole scenes in a different language. but they actually don't know how to speak the language. They're just memorizing the words, the sounds, the inflections. If you were to put that person, that actor, into a country and say, okay, I need you to go and live a day in, say, Germany, and they did German in their movie, they wouldn't really know what to do. They might understand some of the sounds, some of the numbers, but they couldn't speak fluently. When it comes to healing our nervous system, it's not enough just to do the exercises. So I caught a comment actually on YouTube the other day here, and someone said to us, and we answered this, and I wanted to add an additional answer. They said, I don't understand. I'm doing these neurosensory exercises that Irene teaches. I'm pretty sure they meant my stuff. Every day, I've even upped it to 3 times a day. Nothing is changing. Now, my hunch, my hypothetical here is this person, maybe, this is my suggestion, is doing those separately. They might be getting an experience of stimulation to the system. They're feeling things, they're noticing things, they're moving things, they're looking, they're orienting, but they're not integrating it with real life. In other words, they're not learning how to speak the language of learning about their their interoception, their feelings, their senses, their movements, orientation outside in the world. So I might teach someone how to orient, which is a common thing that we teach, where you're looking and seeing the world and feeling how that impacts you inside. You might do that in the comfort of your own home, but then you get in your car and you turn the ignition and you back up and you hit a trash can. Integration would have been such that you got in your car, you paused, you oriented, you look around, oh shoot, so-and-so didn't move the trash can out of the driveway. I better go get it. So I think one of the reasons why we struggle, at least in the West, under our regular kind of Prussian school system, is we often are not taught as young little people how to integrate our learning. You have math, you have history, you have social studies, you do art on this day, and physical education is on these days. We're not integrating how we learn, how do we connect to the environment, how does this extrapolate into the real world? Typically, that kind of critical thinking doesn't occur until you get into grad school, if you're lucky. And so a lot of us have not been taught how to naturally integrate what we learn in a course or in an exercise into real life. So integration, in my sense, and what we really strive to teach our students is we'll teach you these lessons and exercises within the course, and they need to be there. You have to learn your ABCs and 1, 2, 3s to learn language. We're going to teach you how to speak it in a safe, contained environment, but then we need you to go out into the world and experiment with these tools as you relate to others. Can you brush your teeth and feel your feet on the ground at the same time? While that might seem very remedial, these are the sorts of mind-blowing ahas that our students will get when they have never considered that their feet are under them when they're standing and brushing their teeth. This is a true story, right? Someone will go to the grocery store and they've never noticed entire parts of a store because they've just been so tunnel visioned to just get what they need and they want. There's so many examples I can give. I won't go into that. So integration is essential, and so much of what is taught currently in the somatic healing trauma space are these exercises, these somatic exercises, but they're not being integrated with the rest of our world. And they often aren't being integrated with our interoception, our viscera. And so part of what one does behaviorally when they go through SmartBody, SmartMind is they are learning how to rekindle this interoception, this attunement, this co-regulation and self-regulation with self. And that is what builds capacity, and that is what builds regulation of the nervous system. So I'm going to get into some questions. Thank you all for listening to me with this little lecture. I just tried to cover the bare minimum around integration and interoception. If you have questions about what I've just talked about, please let me know. But I'm going to get into the questions here that some of you have posted. So someone asks, what are the sensations of heat about? It could be a lot of things. I can't answer that specifically for you, but heat is a sign that the temperature is increasing in our body, and that can happen obviously due to ambient temperature, the sun. It can be due to something processing in the digestion that's a little off. If you've ever eaten food that is a bit off, there will be a flush of heat, and that is the immune system sending in the big guns to get rid of that bacteria. Again, if we want to talk about, say, viral activity in the system, we want a fever that goes in and it kills that viral activity. Same with bacteria. We will also get heat through movement, right? So if you exercise, you'll get flush in the face. But there's also heat that occurs just out of nowhere. And that usually is a autonomic nervous system response, the system cycling through what we would call fight, flight, maybe into freeze. Someone will say the person has gone flush, that kind of thing. And it's basically there's blood vessels all underneath our skin and they're dilating, right? And it's making the blood come to the surface to release that internal heat. We can also get heat when we are, I've experienced this, when there's a feeling of needing to move bowels, there can be a flush of heat. Again, these are bodily processes that are typically very, very normal and important. But again, going back to that baby, if a baby is not properly cared for when they are overheating or they have gas or they've eaten something not well, I've worked with one student ages ago who, not too long ago, a couple years ago, whom the parents didn't realize that they were allergic to the formula she was getting as an infant. And she was having a massive allergic reaction to this formula. And it was just throwing everything off. And they never thought about what this could have been until 6 months in. And to this day, she's still working with that, right? So that shows how these early connections are so important. All right, let me have a little water and then we'll keep going. Next question. So first, I think I understand what this question says, so I'll just read it how it was written. So first anxiety, and then from teachings of spiritual teachers, I became completely numb. Can't feel anything except fear. So this comes into what we would call spiritual bypass. I prefer to call it somatic bypass, and I've done quite a few pieces on this. One is a long form article titled, "Is there a mindfulness bubble that's about to burst?" I wrote this back in, I think, 2015. And what we've seen, and while this isn't like data driven, there's enough anecdotal and evidence-based elements that I've seen and my colleagues have seen, and I've heard enough stories that if we try to go into too high of a level of consciousness training, spiritual work can be very tricky and very intense. Meditation falls into this. Our consciousness it's an entity itself. It has high processing power. And if we try to move and work with these elements of ourselves and this core viscera of ourselves and our connection to the planet, to the ground, we would call this grounding, to be simple. If we don't have a good tethering to earth, to ourselves, to our insides, we can start doing these higher level practices of consciousness and spirituality, and we can actually push ourselves into more, we would call activation. This would be sympathetic arousal, the fight, flight. And if we don't know what to do with all the things that we're feeling, and it's so intense and too much, and we don't know how to resource, we don't know how to redistribute those sensations, that energy, we can pop ourselves into what we would call a shutdown response. But under that shutdown is a ton of fight, flight energy. We would call this anxiety. And so if we have flipped ourselves into too much spiritual and somatic bypass work, what we may feel is just this pure fear. So that fear has no differentiation. There's no nuance to it. There's no ability. It's kind of like, balls of yarn that get all messed up and you try to like find the thread to kind of unravel it. It's kind of like that, right? And it's just this big mess of fear. The good news is we can work with this, but we don't focus on spiritual or meditative practices. We focus on what I like to call the basics of nervous system health, connecting to the system, learning how to be in the environment, learning how to reconnect to this body of ours in a very slow, titrated way, not pushing, not forcing. And I can honestly say that we have seen so many people who come into SmartBody, SmartMind, and my work and my education, and they're exactly in this boat. They thought they had been doing amazing mind-body work for decades for some people, and then they realized they've just been coping and managing the dysregulation. In a sense, the tigers in their body have been dormant and sedated, but they need to get out, right? And so that's why we might just feel nothing but fear and chaos. Next question, how do you remember what happened as a baby? So we may not remember what happened as a baby because before the age of sort of 3-ish, we call this pre-verbal. We're not talking yet. We're not making meaning out of the world through our higher brain. But what we are remembering, and this goes to kind of a classic book that was written by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk called The Body Keeps the Score. The body will keep the score of everything that has occurred, even in utero and even preconception, what happened to our mothers and to our ancestors. So if we are born, obviously we are, and we have to have a surgical procedure as an infant, or we have distress during birth, very common is umbilical cords being wrapped around the neck, or emergency C-sections, or being stuck in the birth canal and having to be pulled out in ways that can be very forceful and traumatizing. We won't remember the actions necessarily with our mind, but our body will have, how shall I say, symptoms of that stress. This is very much true for folks who would classify and be labeled with fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome. There is a cycling of fight, flight, freeze, shutdown constantly occurring. And what that does to the fascia, to the muscles, to the heart, to the whole entire organism is it's in this state and flux of fight, flight, freeze, fight, flight, freeze, ba, 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 ba. And that makes it such that the system is in this sort of tension and chaos. And so our job as adults, if we want to heal this, is we have to, again, go back to these basics and learn how to connect to these tensions, but not get Velcroed to them, not get coupled with them, and be able to swing our focus and attention to areas of our body or areas outside of our body as a way to resource and then as a way to come out of that stress response. So I'm going to connect that with what I said about the newborn baby who's in distress, or the kid that cut their finger or scraped their knee or elbow. Is we're essentially trying to do what never occurred to us when we were young, but as adults with our higher brain on board. Now, what will happen as we start to get more regulated and I'm going to say connected and grow capacity in our somatic system, we may have memories, not cognitive, but we'll sense something. We'll feel, and this is where people might feel terror. They might feel fear. They might feel a sense of not being able to breathe, of their heart rate starting to beat out of nowhere. This is something I've experienced due to my early traumas. And when we have the knowledge on board that goes, whoa, this is a sympathetic, this is a fight, flight reaction coming out. It came out of nowhere. I feel like I'm being choked right now and no one's choking me. That can be a sign that this old, say, umbilical cord wrapped around the neck when we were born or in utero, that somatic memory is being presented to us to work with. But if we don't understand how these somatic memories get trapped and what to do with them when they come up, and how to stay grounded, oriented, tethered to the here and now, we can then re-traumatize ourselves. And so a big, big part of what I teach through my curriculum in SBSM is really teaching you guys the new language of your somatic physiology, and also how to have, I call it somatic first aid, so that when you are faced with a really difficult emotion, sensation, flash of just sense of this, something is wrong, we don't, or you don't go into more survival stress. You take it and go, okay, this is what this is. I'm going to do my tools, my practices to stay grounded, tethered, etc. Someone asked, could this also happen in the teen years? My sense is that misattunement, 100%, right? Here's what's interesting. If we have a good, really solid co-regulating upbringing in infancy, toddler years, we really do have that nice, secure attachment. We do have a very strong, robust nervous system. Our nerves that go to our heart and our gut are just solid. They know how to take us out of activation into regulation. So if we're in our teens and we had that good upbringing, we will have more resilience when something bad happens to us. We just will, right? And this can explain why some kids just thrive more in the face of adversity and stress in, say, university or in junior high, senior high, when there's a bit more stress, when all the hormones start raging and cliques start to form. Like some kids, like they'll feel it, but it isn't going to throw them into horrific behaviors and reckless behaviors and all this sorts of stuff. They have a good, literally home base, because home is safe and they had that safety from the beginning. You take a kid that was born and raised in, and it doesn't have to be physical abuse or sexual abuse, just this constant chronic misattunement. Parents are super busy, nobody's there, nobody's listening to you, you got to fend for yourself. That is terrifying for a little person, but we cope with it. And this is where functional freeze comes in. I have got to do this all on my own because nobody is here. And so I will. But under that is often a lot of dysregulation. And this is where we then get into our teenage years, and then hormones start and our bodies just feel weird to us. And that's where a person can really go into a bit of chaos, a bit of overactivation. They can get traumatized because they don't know how to be with their bodies. If we weren't cared for and taught how to be with our basic physiology, and by that I mean our digestion, our excretion, how we clean ourselves, how we touch ourselves, how we do all these things, how we take care of our space, when we start to go through that hormonal shift, it can be absolutely mind-blowing to a kid that hasn't had any good attunement, attachment, and this good sense of interoception. So that is my take on teenage years. It really depends on what happened in those first few years of life. Okay, next question. So it looks like a statement, but I will mention it. So I'm in functional freeze. I understand that. I was as well. I'm a recovering functional freezer. So I'm trying to bring my focus to my external world and not trying to feel internal sensations. Okay, great. I am in functional freeze. I understand it from your teachings, but it is very difficult for me to be consistent with the neurosensory exercises. That's why I'm suffering. Great observation. And here's what I have to say. Just keep being consistent. I don't know how any more to say it other than how can you find ways, and this is where sometimes we have to do a little overriding. So let's just say it's too much to sit down and be still and listen and do. Pop on one of my neurosensory exercises. I'm assuming maybe you're one of our students already, and do your normal stuff around the house. Wash the dishes, make your food, play with your dog, fold laundry, put something on when you're going for a walk, so that you're kind of not separating, but you're taking the pressure off of, I have to sit and do this. And the reason why I say this is because, again, because of our upbringing, for many of us in school systems, we had horrific experiences of learning. I would say it is not taught to us in the West unless we had really good interactive parents who informed us with all sorts of things and welcomed positive and negative debate and discussions at the dinner table. And it's okay to speak your mind. You're not going to get slapped. You're not going to get sent to the room. But for so many of us, our school system, and this was more so my parents' generation, like if you got something wrong, you got hit with a ruler or worse. And so we are also, not only are we dealing with our dysregulations from this lack of good interoceptive attunement when we were young, we're also dealing with this crazy school system that has really treated us not like humans. They've really treated us like animals that are meant to be contained and basically trained to sit still and learn and regurgitate. So what I want to say to this person asking this question or this statement, and for all of you who know that, yep, that's how I was raised, that's what happened in my school system, just be aware that when you go into this work, if you do join SBSM, and I say this over and over again, be ready for a little bit of tug of war between your past experiences of learning and this new way of learning. And all I can say is trust the process. Our systems don't want to be stuck in fight flight. Our systems don't want to be stuck in a constant state of threat. The body knows that this is not healthy. This is why we get sick. There's enough evidence that shows and proves that. So now we have to give the body what it originally wanted and is designed for through millennia of humans being here on this planet. Animals know this in the wild so well. Right? You have an animal, a bear cub, they are not going to do well if they don't have their mother bear, right? They need that connection. They need that security. They need that safety. They need to be taught how to forage and hunt and do all these things. But then interestingly enough, once that bear is able to do that, mom's gone, right? There's pure independence in the animal kingdom because of this, other than, of course, certain animals are in packs, and I get that. But in our life as humans, we maintain dependency on so many things for so long because we haven't got that, typically, that really good, solid upbringing and learning so that we can figure things out on our own, even amongst horrific stress and stuff. So I hope that answers that question. Next one. Coming out of a dysregulated home and friend group, I still find it hard to get a safe environment. For the moment, I have a lot of professional help, awesome, to go regulate, but wonder how to grow through this. So this is a great question. When we have been steeped in a dysregulated home environment and friend group, it is not quick enough to just shift into a safe environment and everything will be better. Or to find a safe environment, we have to build the safety. This is really important, so listen up. You have to build the safety inside. Because if the safety inside is not built, oddly, energetically, and this is, I've seen this and I know this, we will send a beacon out to the world that we are vulnerable and we can be preyed upon. Not prayer like this, like predatory prey. And so this is key. This is so key because safety is not built by me saying, this is a safe space. Come to my safe space and we're going to do therapy. It doesn't build that way. It builds through our own internal processing of these old survival stresses that have been trapped in our body for so long. I talked about storing all the like tigers in a cage and never letting them out. We got to deal with those fight flight responses inside of us one by one, slowly over time. And as we get those fight flight energies out and we start to lift the freeze and the shutdown that has kept us safe in this dysregulated home, we've got to work those out of our system. And when we do that, it's almost like we're detoxifying our system of our old survival strategies. And Peter Levine, founder of Somatic Experiencing, who I've learned with, and that's one of my practices, he has interviewed perpetrators, people who attack and abuse people. This is, part of our work is understanding, why does this happen? And predators, human predators, will say, I could tell in that crowd who I could attack based on their I just could tell. This is that sixth sense. Their interoception can pick up on someone else's interoceptive insides that are in terror, that are still in dysregulation. This is why we'll hear of people who are continually abused. Or, to take it out of a less abusive example, I've worked with many people who constantly get in accidents, constantly get in car accidents, and they get worse and worse and worse as time goes on. And it's because they are dissociated and disconnected from a vehicle and from being out in the world, and they sort of shut down and they stop seeing around them. So at the end of the day, our safety is bred and created by us getting safe in our cells. And we have to work with this viscera, back to the interoception. We have to work with these responses inside that are putting out the beacon that the world is dangerous, that the world is not a good place to be in, that I will never be safe, I will never be protected. Everybody around me is trying to get me and kill me. When we put that energy out, even if it's unconscious, and usually it is, others will find that, who are looking to perpetuate abuse and trauma cycles. So one of my favorite mentors, Kathy Kane, this is part of the work I do. She has taught me, and of course my colleagues and the people that I work with, how to work at this pre-verbal level. And this is where we work with what's called the stress organs, the spaces of the body that hold these memories. So we have to work with this. It is important to be, in a safe environment. We don't want to be in an environment where there is abuse flying around, whether it's emotional, energetic, mental, verbal, physical, sexual. We don't want that, just like we don't want to be living in a house with mold, right? We can do all the healthy things in the world, but if we have actual environmental toxins in our house, our body will never be able to catch up. So it's kind of a both and, like we want to work with the internal, definitely, and we also want to work with the external. Okay. Next question. This is perfect. I just talked about this. So how does one work with the primary diaphragms without a second person? So just for context, most of us know of the diaphragm as the one that is the respiratory diaphragm that goes down as we breathe in. The diaphragm goes down as we exhale. It comes back up, and it lets our lungs properly inflate and exhale. There are also these other diaphragms in osteopathic traditions that go from the head down to the feet, throat, heart, solar plexus, belly, pelvis, feet, top of the head. These diaphragms in our work and in osteopathic traditions hold memory. They hold old traumas. They hold old survival stresses. They hold tension patterns from that accident, from being hit, from being born preemie and being in fear, all these things. So originally this work was done one-on-one, where a practitioner puts their hands on these diaphragms. It's very subtle work. There's no manipulation. It's not massage. It's not Reiki. It's putting the intention into that space and essentially being like the parent that we never got, just holding, waiting, talking in a way telepathically to these areas of just, I'm here. Yes, there was a lot of stress. Yes, there was a lot of trauma, and we're just going to be here. When we work with these in person, there can be all sorts of good stuff come up. There can be old pain cycles, emotions, memories, flow starts to come in. You'll start to feel a pulse in areas. You'll start to see the breath come into the whole body. So the whole body is breathing. Traditionally, like I said, this is done one-on-one with a practitioner. In SmartBody, SmartMind, there are a host of lessons working with the diaphragms, working with an area around the heart called the mediastinum, working with the joints of the body, because the joints are like little tiny diaphragms, every little joint in our body. We work with the connection from the gut to the brain through the vagus nerve. We work with the layers of the body, the fascia, the bone, the muscle, the skin. You work with it through hearing my instruction to guide into your body. So you're using intention and visualization. If you can, I'll encourage people to touch those areas. And then through my guidance, through audio, you do the work yourself. And the diaphragm lessons are probably some of the most powerful ones that I would say really separates what is in SmartBody, SmartMind from other somatic courses where they're not teaching that level. Now, the way that I teach it is from my Feldenkrais training. So I'm also a Feldenkrais practitioner, which is a very high level of teaching people with words, movement, developmental movement patterns, working with the entire skeleton, the muscles, the eyes, the head, the carriage of the body, rolling, standing, squatting. So my training is in that. And so what I've done is I've taken that skill and I've transferred it to the work of Peter Levine and Kathy Kane. And the diaphragms work is also within the somatic experiencing practice at advanced levels. So it was very clear to me that it just was not conducive for people to have to find a practitioner, which gets very expensive when you need to work with these diaphragms for some people years and years and years. I've been doing this work for a long time, for 15 plus years at this level, and I'm still working on old injuries from my earlier days of functional freeze. And I will often sit down at night or in bed and I'll work with my own diaphragms to ensure they are open and flowing. And of course, sitting at this computer, there's a lot of rigidity being in one spot. So I hope that answers that question. They really are beautiful things to work with when you can do on your own, because our intention, as one of my teachers says, intention is a powerful instrument. I'll say that again because it's so good. Intention is a powerful instrument. And so where our intention goes into these areas, and I teach you how to visualize them, you will be amazed at how the body responds so quickly to these. And then, of course, for some of us, if we're not in good trusting that we have that capacity, we can have a little bit of a mind tug of war for a while. That's like, is this really working? I don't think this is working. And so we kind of also have to get over that boundary of believing that our intention can be powerful and work at this level. All right, next question. Any advice for people with bulimia and how to restore regulation there? So yeah, bulimia, I'll put bulimia in with what we might classify as eating disorders. I don't love that term, but anorexia, nervosa, bulimia. What we've seen, and I think there's enough research to really quantify this, is eating disorders are usually a result of early trauma, misattunement, absolute terror, chaos, fear growing up. And then we use one of our primary needs, regulatory needs, which is hunger or lack thereof, or being satiated, as a way to control something. I remember an older client had a very, very abusive home life. And her way of soothing is she would make a cookie batter, and then she would take it, and I can't remember the details, it's not important, but she would take it and I think sit under her bed or in a closet in her room and eat it. And just because, again, when we eat, we masticate, and that sparks a part of our vagus nerve that downregulates our heart. So it soothes us. And then, of course, bulimia is where we might be gorging ourselves, but then we have to bring it up because it's too much food. So when it comes to these, I'm going to call them behaviors, patterns, rituals, if you will. This is same with folks who have what we would call OCD, certain phobias, is we want to get connected to what is occurring. And this is where interoception is so important. What is occurring in the system before the binge. And this is how we would work with people who have seizures. I've worked successfully with people who have seizures in the past. They know that there is a sense that this is coming. This is why people with seizures have animals that can sense this. Think about that. Our animals have more interoceptive awareness typically than us. That's why we have these companion animals for people who say have epilepsy. They know when something's about to happen. Same with diabetes. Isn't that crazy? So when it comes to working with these disordered eating patterns, phobias, need to control certain things, it's less about trying to change that behavior and more about going back and into our internal state and really listening, like, what's going on in my system? Is it grief? Is it fear? Is it sadness? Did this start up when I had a sibling die, when there was a natural disaster in our country, when something happened? Like, does it have an event? Or is it just a lifetime of chronic unsafety? And this is one thing I can control. So we want to work with the underbelly of what's pushing us to need that behavior. And we have had people who have shifted massively out of behaviors that are very, very harmful, as well as what we would classify obsessive compulsive disorder, phobias of all kinds. We've heard stories of people shifting. Is being accident prone an example of not having interoception? It definitely can be. It also can be, so interoception is inside. The flip to that is exteroception, or situational awareness, self-awareness of our space, but also another word called kinesthetic awareness, which is our ability to know, like, I know where all my things are on my desk. I have a glass of water here, my microphone's here. Like, I know the distance, so I'm not going to, smack these and spill everything. So accident prone can be dysregulation, and it can be this lack of interoception. It can also be if we have had other accidents, and this is something I've experienced. I haven't had an accident since I started this work back in 2004, which is, knock on wood, very cool. But when we don't have that good body awareness online as a result of, say, other accidents, we are, in a sense, dissociated somatically from our body, and then that makes us not kinesthetically aware of what is around us. The other sense is, we call it proprioceptive sense. This is the sense in our joints and in relationship to the ground. What I have seen in a lot of people is when kids, when they're young, aren't exposed to hiking and climbing and running and being in rivers and oceans and sand, and they just, for so many reasons, they don't have access to use their bodies in these many ways that were meant to be used. We also can be accident prone because we just don't have a sense of how our body relates to gravity in uneven surfaces. So that is another way that we can become accident prone, is we just don't have a good awareness through our skeleton and in relationship to our vestibular system and so many things. But I will say that having had lots of accidents in the past and not having had any in my 40s and 30s, it has shifted dramatically as my interoception has become more clear, more clean, and I've worked on my dysregulation. Okay, great question. Let me just find where I left off there. Is it possible that you haven't shown your distress as a baby to make it easier for the mother? Or yes? Great question. Sorry, I sped read that. So the question is, my mother said I was a very quiet baby. So there's two questions very similar here. Is this a sign of functional freeze? I feel like I came out of the womb that way. She said I hardly cried, but then I was also highly dissociated. And then the other one is it possible that a baby stops showing distress? For instance, when the mother had stress and postpartum depression, Absolutely. So this is how smart we are, even when we're pre-verbal. Our gut is a powerful sense of what's around us. And so if we are sensing that our primary caregiver cannot offer us strong attunement and attachment, and this will occur because they are just kind of not, they're not there. We actually posted we call it a video meme. It was on YouTube. It's from a video or a movie with Nicolas Cage, and I can't remember the other actor. And it's worth watching because it just portrays what occurs when that baby is looking for that attention and no one is home. And you might be holding your baby, saying, I love you, we're going to give you everything you need. But if that is coming out just as a behavior, it's not enough to say, I love you and let's clothe you and feed you, the best things ever. If nobody's home on the inside, even if you're being pleasant, the baby will feel that. And then the baby will start to shut down. Bruce Perry, who is a child psychiatrist, his book, Born for Love, really gets into this in some beautiful and heartbreaking stories about what occurs to children when they're not given connection and love and consistency. I actually did a video called The Story of Ryan. If anybody wants to go a little deeper into just the consequences of not having that connection, watch The Story of Ryan and The Story of Teddy. They're older videos on my YouTube channel here. And then the other one was Quiet Baby. And I hardly cried. And I came out of the womb that way. Yes. So if mom was under stress, if mother was in fear, and it doesn't have to be because she was being abused by her partner or something. It could just be she's in a great life, but she's shut down. And she's shut down to her own feelings. And she's not listening to the needs of what is needed inside. And she's, say, on a very strict diet. This was really common back in the day where women were afraid to gain weight when they were pregnant. So they're going to go on restrictive diets. That is a stress in utero. Or if mother is, to go back to the question about bulimia, and typically one would not be able to conceive if one is really, really restricting calories because the system knows that it can't sustain a pregnancy for 9 months if there was starvation. So that probably wouldn't occur. But if mother is cutting calories, is stressed, is smoking, is in chemicals all the time for whatever reason, is going to work and having to work 3 jobs, that happens, right? Because they're mothering another child or they're taking care of a parent who's dying. There's so many reasons that we, when we're in utero, will shut down. We will shut down. And so a baby needs to cry. That's their way of communicating to us when they come out. Of course, we don't want the baby to keep crying, right? This is where that attunement and connection comes in. So great question, and definitely something that we hear. I've signed up for SBSM, wonderful, and just wondered if you cover childhood sexual abuse as well as generational childhood sexual abuse. So I don't get into the direct nature of this specific type of abuse in SBSM, just as we don't have specific topics on, say, surgical trauma or certain types of shock traumas or war trauma or vicarious trauma. In many ways, all of these abuses and traumas present very similarly in the body. Now, of course, with sexual abuse, there will be different parts of the body that might be more shut down, like the pelvis. There might be more pelvic pain syndromes. There might be more senses of nobody is safe in the world. I have to protect myself. And this is also indicative of someone who, say, has had massive surgical trauma when they were infants, for example. I have done a special topic lecture on sexual abuse and trauma on my YouTube channel here. It's a long form lecture. So if you haven't watched that, I really recommend that you watch that. But what occurs as we start to gain capacity, and we've worked with many people who have had all sorts of assaults, is especially the diaphragm lessons. I'm just thinking of one particular person, Janet Raftis, who we've interviewed, who's on my site or on the YouTube channel here. She recounts having the healing and the release of a protective movement of fighting off her perpetrator because she was raped. And it happened while doing the diaphragm and I believe joints lesson. And even though she had processed the emotions, the memory, the triggers of that abuse that occurred when she was younger, the somatic imprint was still in her body. She was still shut down and frozen from that attack. And the one thing that finally opened that up was working with the diaphragms and the joints. So if you can't find that one, we can share it with you. It is, it's one of Janet Raftis's older videos. I think it's not too long. It's like 15 minutes. All right, I'm going to go for a little longer here and then we will call it a day. There's so many good questions here. Thank you, everyone. Someone asks, in a video you mentioned that using breath control to regulate yourself can be counterproductive. What do you recommend besides a breathing technique to help work through a panic attack? So there's two answers to this question. If controlling your breath now works when you're having a panic or anxiety attack, then please use it. As we take people through SmartBody, SmartMind, they learn other resources, other skills, other tools that don't manage that restriction, that don't manage that attack. It might be orienting. It might be really connecting with the ground under. It might be the diaphragm lessons that I've just mentioned, where you're feeling the heart rate rise and the constriction and the heat. And rather than trying to sit there and breathe, I might say, get up and move. Get the muscles going, right? Is this there because of an old defensive pattern that needs to be pushed out? To go back to, this topic of if we were assaulted or pinned down for surgery, for example, this is very common in children where they've had to be strapped down for dental procedures, etc. So this is where being able to, this comes back to interoception, such great questions here. How can you go in and find what is the root cause of that sympathetic adrenaline coming up? If you don't have those skills yet, then I say, yeah, do some breath work, do some containment exercises, listen to some music. However, you can also do these strategies, but then do them a little less. Like, how could you maybe do them a little less and just be with the intensity? It's all about being able to be with this intensity of, say, the panic attack and not fearing it. And again, I go back to the baby. If we weren't taught well how to be with discomfort through that co-regulation, we're having to kind of start from scratch. Okay, next question. Can pushing through symptoms and taking a walk anyway lead to rebounds of extreme somatic pains the next day? Definitely can. So if we push down anything, so if I go back to this question before, if we're feeling a tightness somewhere and we know it's there and we do something to distract ourselves, that is not being released and integrated. It's staying inside, and the body is very, very sneaky and clever. It will digest it. And this isn't like a scientific term, but we've seen enough of this that, yeah, the next day there could be a gut problem, or there could be, in the case of females, I've seen folks who've gone through severe stress in a month and then their next menstrual cycle is horrific. And it's not necessarily because their reproductive system is off. Energy gets stored in the body, right? And if there isn't good flow in certain areas, it can get backed up, it can get clogged, it can be stagnant, it can be in a fixed state, and then that's where we get these symptoms. So yes, 100%. Is there any hope to get well from ME and fibromyalgia if I can't afford the course? I'm reading your free material, but now I've got the flu and are even worse. So yes, we've had many people who have started with the free resources. I will say, I'll be honest, they do the free resources so much that they build enough capacity to start to be able to get back and make money, to work. Alignment just starts occurring, and then they can start with, say, the 21-day nervous system tune-up and then SBSM. So we've had many folks who have said we started with these things, the offerings that are free, the audio samplers, really being diligent with noticing your sensations, your emotions, doing all the basics. And then what occurs is that builds capacity, that is building regulation. And then one might find that they have more capacity to start earning. So yes, definitely happens. Okay. Question. I have a lot of triggers going through some of the theory, but I want to do the course. I have done the 21-day tune-up and the practices are life-saving. Wonderful. So it sounds like this is a statement, but I'll answer it as a question. So triggers will occur. I like to replace that word with activation. So when we hear theory, and I will admit, I am honest in my theory. I don't like to hold back. I don't like to offer trigger warnings. I assume and believe that humans have the capacity to hear difficult stuff. And if something is difficult, then that's a very important sign. Whoa, this just activated me. I'm going to pause this lesson or this training call. I'm going to take the rest of the day off of this and go to some of the exercises. So there's ways to be creative around the theory. And I agree, it's a lot to sit and listen for an hour and a half to theory. That can put us into a dissociative state if we're not good at staying in our bodies, staying regulated, having some water, all those sorts of things. So it's important to take pace and to pause even when the theory is being taught. So that's what I really, really recommend. So someone asked, how can I feel connected again? I feel isolated and it's very lonely. Yeah, so I'm not sure if you were here at the beginning, but I read a passage from the results from one of our studies where we are the only study we've done to this date with SmartBody, SmartMind curriculum and folks who have had immense adversity in childhood. And of course, we know the feeling of isolation, being alone, not feeling connection is common when we've had adversity. And what we found, what the study researchers found, is going through the SmartBody, SmartMind curriculum, working on building up your connection to self, to the environment, to the world around you, learning about your system is a way to start to gain a feeling of being connected to self, connected to the environment, and essentially being co-regulating with yourself. And so when we can really listen to our bodies in a titrated way, it actually gives us a little bit of a hobby. It gives us something to pay attention to. Someone asked at the very beginning, all I feel is fear. And that is true when we haven't pieced out and titrated growing up this capacity in ourselves. So it can happen. And I would say that the key is that you want to reverse this, that you want to feel connected to in self, connected to the earth around us, that you want to sense that aliveness in your body, that you want to sense that life force. And I'll just speak to that because we'll be doing a talk on healthy aggression on Saturday. When we have had intense abuse and trauma, we are in a shutdown response, a collapsed response, immobility. And that is very defeating, right? There's a lot of shame usually involved in that. And so we need to get the system revving up again in small doses. And this is where that healthy aggression comes out, where that building up of life force energy and feeling, say, boundaries and clarity in what we want can come up. When we were that baby that wasn't given what we needed, it can be a little bit of a tug of war to understand that, oh, what I want and need is acceptable? That's weird. that was never allowed. And the answer is yes, your needs are definitely important, and what you want is definitely important. There's a little element of being selfish in this process. Really focusing on you, the individual, is so important. So the next question is someone who's on our call yesterday. So Seth said something that made me feel like you can't do SBSM if you don't feel fully safe in your home. Is this true? So it depends on what's going on in your home. So what he meant by that is if there's literally abuse and violence in your house, it is tougher to do this. Now, I'm not going to say that one can't, but it's definitely a lot harder because you're going to be working on this stuff and then you walk into the living room and you're just hit, you know, with crossfire of words and abuse and all that kind of stuff. So you say, I have a space I can be in, but I lack a feeling of internal safety anywhere I am. Aside from having aspects of my life that feel threatening to my systems because of minor past traumas, there are toxic people in my life. Should I even try? So I believe you should try. The question I would ask to you is, do you want to try? Right? So this comes back to us really knowing that we deserve to feel safe and protected and loved and cared for. And it usually often starts with ourselves. And so I just talked about internal safety above, so I'm not going to repeat myself. So if you weren't here from the beginning, please go back and listen to the start. Our internal safety is built up from inside. It makes it harder, like I said, if there is abuse flying around all around us. So that's important. You know, how can we mitigate those toxic elements as much as possible? But then it comes back to internal, because here's the thing, and this comes back to the accident-prone question. If we have got unsafety inside and we're kind of slumped in kind of a victimhood mentality, I'll be really honest, the people looking to prey on victims will find us. And so this is where the toxic people come in. Our radar, it's called Interoception, the perception of threat, but also the perception of safety will be off. And so we want to reestablish proper perception of threat and safety so that we don't attract those people and we don't stay with those people. So I hope that answers that question. Is there any practical info about working with the diaphragms? No. You could probably find an osteopathic textbook, but my sense is that's not going to offer what one might need. So I don't teach the diaphragms in open source material because it's not something that we want to do right out of the gate, because a lot can be stored in there and we want to build up to working with them. What is your experience with severe insomnia? So I haven't had severe insomnia personally. What I've seen and heard from my students is that their sleep patterns improve. There might be portions of time where your sleep is a bit different, and that's because you are figuring out how to regulate your system, and that will throw off core things, but that's usually fine. It usually comes back to baseline, and essentially when we have really, really strong regulation, to go back to the safety piece, we're no longer feeling unsafe. We have real cellular safety inside. We don't feel the outside world as an absolute threat all the time. We are able to sleep. The other important thing with sleep, and I talked about this recently on another call, is it is very important to ensure that your light environment is healthy. Our exposure to blue light in homes that have artificial light, computer screens, phones, not getting enough sunlight, because sunlight, and it doesn't just have to be bright sun, it's just light on the skin, creates melatonin in our body, and that then gets released when we're sleeping. So if we are never outside, if we aren't having our skin exposed to natural light, even in the dead of winter, we want to get that light on our arms, on our faces, on as much skin as possible. That helps us sleep at night, as does ensuring we get morning sunlight in the morning into our eyes. Again, it's not about direct sun, it's just that natural light. So I've done 5 interviews with experts on this. If you go to my playlist here on YouTube, it's called, I think, Circadian and Quantum Biology. That goes into that a bit deeper. Super important for sleep. But what I have found is that when there is stored survival stress and there's deep dysregulation, in addition to the sleep, we want to make sure that we're working on our stored survival stress, because that will keep us up at night. All right, next question. So this is on anger. What to do with anger that dislodges with the work, yet does not move up and out, even with the haka, but stays in the body, and it just feels steady burn, like a steady burn over days and weeks. So I'm going to make an assumption, but I'm not sure. So if you're a student of mine and you're working with the practices we use, my sense is there's still not enough baseline safety and capacity to fully get this up and out of the system. So something is holding back that tiger, so to speak. Now, if you haven't worked through my curriculums and you haven't built up somatic capacity, this is where interoception is huge. If we're not able to sense what's going on, we can suppress that anger from coming up. Now, sometimes we might think it's anger that has to come up, but often what can be under that anger is deep, deep grief, like unconsolable grief. I'm thinking about a scene from Good Will Hunting. You can find it on the internet. I just watched it the other day, where Matt Damon comes into Robin Williams' office, and Robin Williams is talking to him about his abuse, because he was abused as a kid. And all he said was, "It's not your fault. It's not your fault." And he just kept saying it and saying it. And Damon got a little angry. He started to protect and boundary, and then he just broke down in utter tears. And in that clip, he says, "I'm sorry." He's not saying "I'm sorry" to Robin Williams. It's because when kids are abused in the way he was, they think it's their fault. And so as he said, "I'm sorry," it's getting out that childhood meaning, which is, I'm getting hit because I'm bad. So again, I'm kind of putting some assumptions in here based on this question and not knowing your history, but these are kind of some of the ways that we cannot get that full anger out. The question is it actually anger, or is it something else, or is there not enough capacity on board to get that anger out? Okay, there's a question on Hashimoto's. I'm going to answer that tomorrow, because we're going on 90 minutes here. And tomorrow I'm going to be talking about chronic illness. So for you who has the Hashimoto, or there's any autoimmune question, come back tomorrow. I will talk about this. But yes, essentially, again, I was just writing these out the other day. There is a whole list of autoimmune, and we would call them diseases of chronic stress and trauma, and Hashimoto's is one of them. It's a thyroid condition, as is Graves' syndrome. So I'll get into those tomorrow. Oh, so many good questions. Okay, I'm going to end on this one. If we didn't get to your question, please put it in the comments. So remember your question, and someone from my team, probably my husband, will respond. All great questions, but I have to get on to another thing, and I also need to have a bit of a break. So next question, final question. Could you elaborate on transgenerational healing with SBSM? How does the family heal when one is doing the work? Is this about the field and Lynn McTaggart? Partially, yes. Yes. So there are some people that say that no time exists. I'm not trying to be existential, but when we have had traumas in the past, whether it's ours or someone else's, they kind of infuse us. And the reason they infuse is because we were raised by those people who had the abuse, the traumas before, and before. This is how this stuff gets passed on. This is the nurture of the nature versus nurture debate. And we kind of know it's both now. And so with transgenerational healing, it's a very interesting thing. And we've seen this with our students where a mother, for example, will work on herself because she's got, let's say, Hashimoto's or some form of chronic illness or some form of disorder. And she will report that her adult children or child is all of a sudden eating better or taking care of themselves better, or that adult child is actually connecting with her in a different way, even though she hasn't said to the adult child, I'm doing this nervous system work with Irene, check it out. Because we always say to people, if you have kids, don't enforce this stuff on them. Of course, if they're infants and toddlers, excuse me, and children, you dose this out to those little people because you're different and so you relate to them differently. But we've seen, again, adult children change when their parents do this work. There's also some thought that our ancestors are around us, and when we change ourselves, we shift the lineage in the past. And then, in my opinion, more importantly, we shift the lineage in the future. So someone who has healed their trauma and is really working on their wounds that occurred to them from their parent and their parents and grandparents and all that, they are going to have, and you don't have to have children to heal the future generations, because whomever you interact with, whether it's a friend, a coworker, the person waiting at the bus stop that you just smile at and just say hi, that's going to give them a little boost. That's going to offer them a little bit of social engagement. That's going to help their nervous system soothe. So when we work with ourselves, this is why this is really an individual job. A lot of my colleagues talk about collective healing. I actually don't love that term. I think the collective heals when each individual heals, because you can't force a group of people to all do the same thing. It has to start with each person, and then that person ripples out to those that they connect to. Now, The Field is an interesting book because it gets into the power of intention. I read this book over 10 years ago, I think. It gets into the power of distant prayer and focus and distant healing. And it has shown that that works. So we can also, with ourselves, if we play an experiment, this isn't inner child work. This is just sort of imagining, what is it going to be like? What would it be like when I am more able to be with that panic attack and ride that wave and come out of it? Or what might it be like when I feel soothing in my system before I go to bed, right? There's this ways that we can play with our intentionality into the future, but we can also, in some ways, go back and go, wow. So for parents who have children and you really did stuff wrong, and there's nothing wrong with admitting that, this is where having that conversation with yourself and maybe even owning up, I'm so sorry, I let you cry yourself to sleep. You wouldn't do this to a child, by the way. You wouldn't tell a 6-year-old, hey, little Johnny, the reason why you have this disorder is because I sleep trained you and did this. Like, no, you wait until your children are adults or old enough as teenagers to understand and they have good regulation. And there can be a lot of healing by having these conversations with older children. Usually I'm going to say like over the age of 16, maybe a little younger, but they need to be teenagers where they can feel comfortable expressing their hurt, because they will know somewhere in their system that, yeah, mom left me to cry myself to sleep. So that's another way that you can heal those transgenerational wounds, is really owning up to the mistakes you made. They weren't because you were at fault. It's just you didn't know any different. And that's where real honesty, vulnerability, rawness, authenticity comes in. But it has to be at the right time, the right moment. So those are just little pieces on transgenerational healing. It definitely happens. The students that we talk to who not only parent little ones, have yet to have babies, and are working, say, with children in schools and are just making all sorts of cool things happen, that is also transgenerational healing. It doesn't have to happen in your bloodline. It can occur in how you work with others and help others find regulation, and then that goes out into the world. So we're all doing it. We're all doing transgenerational healing. Of course, we have to do it for it to work, and it does have to come down to this nervous system level. I might end on a quote that Peter Levine said to us once a long, long time ago in a course. He believes, and this feels a little utopic, but I'll say it anyway, that true human enlightenment will occur when every single person on this planet has a regulated nervous system. I do believe that to be true. We're not quite there yet, but this is the start, I believe, of that happening. I've seen it in my students. I've seen it in my own life. I've seen it in my own interactions within my family system, my husband's family system, colleagues and their family systems. In a world where we think everything is kind of chaotic and not going well, there is a lot that is good, and we have to really focus on that. And at the end of the day, we can only work with ourselves directly, and then that goes out to everyone else. So I'm going to end this here. I know there's some questions that are still here, but I must pause and take a break. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you to my team to putting the questions in another doc so I can find them easily. Thank you for being here. Again, remember, interoception and integration, very important pieces of what we teach, and why SmartBody, SmartMind, we feel and our students feel, is very different from other online courses out there. It is an investment. It is a commitment. When you become a member, you are a member for life. So you can come back and repeat the material and join live over and over and over again. Tomorrow, I will be doing a talk on chronic illness, same time, same place, and how that's connected to our nervous system and how we work with that in SBSM. On Friday, mental health and addiction. And then on Saturday, we'll do a special topic on healthy aggression. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for listening to me for so long. We'll talk to you later. Bye.